that is one of the most horrific distortions going on the web. And it reveals sadly the malice behind the smear campaign. You know, I don't actually know how the people involved in that sleep at night. The quote that is in the most distorted, egregious fashion, played all over the web is she was 14 going on 35 and I never forced her. When you listen to that quote, it sounds like, right, as you say, I'm 45 years old, right? I just had or confessed to having sex with a minor, right? I'm now justifying, right, having sex with a minor by saying, right, she was 14 going on 35 and I never forced her, which is, grotesque, in any way you want to tell that story. And of course, completely not true. But it's literally been, one of the 3 or 4 central components of the smear campaign. And again, it reveals the malice behind it. If I had done that in a distorted way about someone, I put it all over the web, I literally wouldn't sleep at night. I would do everything I can to move heaven and earth, right, to make, amends and to correct that. But the smear activists have done it intentionally, in dozens of places around the web. And it is a form of, internet abuse, on every level. So let me just, address the truth. One, when that quote was completely, absolutely distorted, right? The writer of the New York Times column asked me about the quote. I told him it was completely distorted. Right? He repeated it anyways without my explanation, right? Because apparently his intention was to distort it. And why would you actually use a quote which I completely repudiated, like from 2001 or 2002, which is where the quote originates from? Why would you use it? I'd completely repudiate it. It's completely out of context, completely distorted. Why would you use it unless your intention, was you had an agenda? You were trying to do something which was certainly nothing to do with appropriate reporting and fairness or integrity. This original quote comes from a conversation with a reporter around 2001, 2002. I don't remember the exact conversation, but basically, right, when I was 19, I was a teenager, an adult, 19, right? And Sarah was a freshman in high school, right? You enter high school at 14. You can be 15 as a freshman. You can be 14, right? By the time Sarah and I were involved, which was somewhere around, Hanukkah, Christmas, it was minimally 14, right? So the whole notion, by the way, which she's done with complete, malicious intention to deceive, where she says in her article, I was 13 when he appeared at my parents' table. And if she may have been in the beginning of her freshman year, 13, her birthday is November 30th, best of my understanding. We got involved around Christmas. So she certainly was 14 when we were involved, or she was 14 in the beginning of the year and she was 15. I don't know which is true, but she wasn't 13, right? That's for sure. First up, that kind of, desire to push it down to 13, which also has different implications in terms of terms that are used, et cetera, and allows for just a fuller, process of smear and slander. That's just not true, right? So, I'm 19, right? Sarah's either 14 or 15, but she's a freshman in high school. And we have a love relationship. My version of the events is validated, by polygraph. She writes me love letters, right? I have no indication whatsoever that she's not as in love with me as I am with her. And I have every indication that we are totally in love. Is that edgy? Right? Sure it is. Does that happen every day? No. But is it weird or pathologized? No, not at all. It happens, actually. Right? Okay. Would I do it again? Absolutely not. Do I regret it? For sure. Right? Because obviously there wasn't a container to hold it. Did we both ever discuss, the laws of, you're a minor? Never came up between us. That wasn't a conversation then. That wasn't in the zeitgeist. It wasn't in consciousness then, in that way. And by the way, the amount of people that I know who are fully respectable, conservative, liberal teachers, sexual abuse activists, et cetera, had a similar relationship is legion. So what happened was, right, the relationship got distorted later on, for whatever process Sarah went through, which allowed that to happen. And I talk about that fully, best I can understand it and bring all the information to bear, right, in the section called Old Stories, on this website, and in a long essay called The Response to Sarah. which I worked on myself and with a number of leading women activists who are strong stands on these issues. So, what I meant to say was she was 14 going on 35, meaning what an awesome human being she was. When I knew her, that we were both essentially kids, right? I was legally an adult, right? She was, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've already said that, and wow, there we were, 19 and 14, right, in love. But while she was 14 going on 35, I said 25 years later, meaning I was looking back and just reflecting on the fact, right, that, she was deep, she was beautiful, she was mature, right? And I loved her. Now, would that be a rationalization, right, for a 45-year-old adult to be involved with a 14-year-old? Obviously not. And I, in retrospect, regret that involvement. Of course I do. But 14 going on 35 was actually, it was intended as a sweet, loving, honoring compliment. And obviously, the phrase "I never forced her" was a repudiation, right, of any notion, right, that had been put out there that there was any sort or any kind of force whatsoever, which is an absolute blatant lie, right? Never happened. And finally, when you put that quote by itself, it looked like we had sexual relations, right? We had no sexual relations or anything even vaguely approaching. And on that as well, I took full polygraph. Right? We had, very limited above the waist contact was my contact with her, right? At the time. And so to take that quote out of context, the way it's been done all over the web is an affront to integrity. It's an affront to men. It's an affront to women. It's an affront to sexuality, right? It is a form of sneer that is unconscionable. And the amount of people, right, who are friends of mine, with moments, wow, Mark, you had sex with a 14-year-old. Was that in the last couple of years? And then that's the way it's been intentionally disseminated. And it's been, again, one of the cores of the smear campaign. And I'll say it the last time. I think I probably said it twice already, but I'll say it the last time because it's important. It actually is one of the places where the fig leaf of noble motive falls away, right? And you actually get the malice right behind the smear campaign.